What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's edition of the show. It's our privilege to be joined by Michael Walsh, the founder of the Walsh Business Growth Institute and strategist, making up my own words already, strategist who helps business owners break through plateaus. What I like about his work is that it centers on building the right team, the right structure, and the right habits so that leaders can scale with confidence instead of chaos, which is something we talk about all the time, is building ourselves up on purpose with intention and not just leaving things to happenstance. He's known for challenging conventional wisdom around hiring, growth, and leadership, and for giving owners the clarity they need to get unstuck, which in this kind of time in our lives, I think a lot of people might be feeling stuck. So his wisdom is very spot on. I'm super happy to have him here at this time. And Michael, it's an honor to have you on the show, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Before we get started, we were just talking off air. You got some electrolytes going. You already got your workout in for the day. And I like to think of this I like to think of this show as the same thing. Like, you just didn't walk into the gym today and do the heaviest thing. So I got to give you some warm-up questions, Michael, to give us a little insight into who you are and get us ready for some of the heavier lifting in the conversation. You ready for that?
Sure.
All right,
So
Michael, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
What's
You're
something you've been learning about yourself lately?
something I've been learning about myself. Um, I find that I'm a better responder than initiator. So I
Interesting.
actually work really well when I'm working tag team with people. And we can get into great, like we are today. We're going to get into a great dialogue. I trust that we'll have a great time in the conversation. But if I have to initiate something from scratch, I find that I'm not as strong at that. Now, my way around that, I'll do research, and then the research will be the thing that pokes me and allows me to sort of expand on an idea or test different theories and things like that. That's probably why I've been writing the books that I've written myself, because it's like, I get curious about an idea, but then you read enough different things, and then I go test it in different situations, and all of a sudden I can expand an idea or a concept.
I love it. Yeah, that's good. What's a small habit or ritual that's been giving you energy lately?
It's making sure that every single day I'm doing something that has something to do with motion. One of the things that I do is on pull days I use bands, and on push days I use either body weight or different weights. Um, and the pull weight, it sort of pushes me, it pushes me, so I'm pulling it, and that's where I can do a band version of deadlifts, as well as bicep curls, and bent rows, and as well as calf raises I started doing as well. And what I found was that in doing it that way, I've actually gotten myself further along faster than I had when I was just using free weights. So um, again, little habits, and again, all I have to do is like, okay, so what did I do 2 days ago? That's what I beat today. And what did I did yesterday, in a push day is what I'll beat tomorrow. That kind of thing. So just by taking little incremental steps, I just need to do one more or two more than I did the last time, and it's been growing.
Yeah, I love that. And I no doubt that theme's going to come up in our conversation because in doing some research, I saw that those terms a little bit, incremental steps and slow progress is still progress. So we'll keep talking about that. Michael, who's someone in your life right now that's been influencing your thinking or inspiring you?
Been influencing my thinking. Well, one of my favorite people that I watch and follow is Marcus Buckingham. Um, he was he was one of the researchers that originally did the whole. He worked with Gallup, and he was involved with the 12 elements of employee engagement, and they did studies on what engages employees. And he's really taking it very far. But everything he does is based on empirical evidence, and I've always enjoyed. His thinking, his processes, but more importantly, how he applies that very positively to support people in being the best they can be. And I just love the way he thinks. I love the fact that he's not anecdotal, he's empirical. he says, well, let's go find out if it's true. So he's one of the people that comes to mind. I mean, I have a
Yeah,
few.
yeah, that's good. I'll have to look into him. Where are you finding his stuff? Where's he publishing at?
Well, I originally found him when I went to the World Business Forum in New York a number of years ago, and then every few years he'll come back, or I'll see him speaking at some different place. So I've been watching that. But I originally ran across him in the '90s when he was part of the Gallup organization, and that's when they did the whole. When I think the first book that he co-authored when he was still part of Gallup was First Break All the Rules. And then the Gallup organization continued to do longitudinal studies on that. Buckingham left and created his own organization. I believe, I don't know if he's still in the UK. I think he may be, but he actually built his own international research company, and they've been doing a lot of things about employee engagement, but also productivity at work, and what supports people to be high performers. And he brings a very human centric approach to everything, which I love.
Hmm. Yeah, those are studies that are based that way are very easy, at least I find, very easy to apply to your own life and to
hmm
apply it to the lives of those around you. I love that. All right, one more question for you, Michael. When you think about the season you're in, what word or phrase describes it best?
So the season I'm in geographically, or the season I'm in
Oh,
in my life?
spiritually, your
Okay.
season. Where are you at?
Okay. In my season, um, it's interesting that where I'd say that I'm at is learning more and sharing more actively. I have one of my goals has always been to see where I can contribute, but it's like, um, I mean, my business last May was 30 years young. So I've been around for a minute or two, and what I'm finding is that, for example, with the last book that I wrote, it was as much or more about just contributing to people on a standalone basis, no ifs whatsoever. Before I'd show a part of something, or I'd give a dimension or perspective. But this one, I tried to give everything that I would happen to be working on at that time, and it's like, if people never met me or saw me or heard of me or heard a podcast or anything like that, and somebody happened to pick up a book, what I was hoping is on a standalone basis, they could actually do something that made a difference. And I thought, well, the more I can do that, I mean, you got to be careful with a book because you have to make it complete enough so that it makes a difference, but you also have to make it straightforward enough that it's not like a horrible thing to try to read. You have to have a little compassion for your reader.
Right.
Evolving from that and into thought leadership more. And I don't think of thought leadership as just being an expert. I think of thought leadership as uh, contributing first of their kind projects in particular communities that have a ripple effect that don't end up having anything to do with me, but they actually quietly make a difference somewhere.
Mm.
So I'm doing that a lot more. Um, so that's what I would say about the season that I'm in.
Yeah, I love that. And I love talking about being a thought leader. And sometimes I think we get confused that being a thought leader means we have to have all the answers. And sometimes the best thought leader has the right question.
hmm In fact, I think the right questions are way more important than the right answers, because everybody will come up with their own version of answers, and different answers fit for different people. But if you can provoke thought, um,
Mm.
that's the interesting thing. What I find is thought leaders are never thought leaders of the answer. They're thought leaders of the issue. And
Hmm.
and it's by encouraging and engaging dialogue that a whole series of answers come up that nobody could have ever thought of. In fact, one of the things that I do, even if I get stuck on anything, the first thing I do is I say, what questions should I be asking myself, the answers to which will get me past whatever this logjam is that I'm in? And
Yeah.
and it's fascinating because when I come up with the questions, I'm like, well, that's a good question, or oh, that leads to this question, and I'll have 10 or 12, and there'll be 5 or 6 of it. And I start answering the questions. All of a sudden, I'm past the logjam.
Yeah, I think that's such an important strategy. And I think that's an important thing to do in life is to stay curious and continue asking questions.
hmm I mean, here's the what. Well, let's put it this way. This goes into a whole different thing. I mean, do I have permission to go on my? I'm not going to call it a rant because that would be
Let's
negative,
go.
but
I don't even need to hear the rest of the qualifier. Let's go, Michael. Let's
I'd
go.
say it's more of a misconception. If an individual contributor grows, what makes somebody a high performer is the ability to generate a result. Now, the way they generate that result, everybody goes, wow, they just have the determination, they do whatever, and they just get stuff done. Well, yeah, but there's a little bit more to it than that. Thought always precedes action, and action is what leads to the result. When people, yet at the same time in our businesses, when we want to promote somebody to a manager, we go, Maxine, she's amazing. She always gets the results. Like I can trust her. She is absolutely super. Everything I give her, she does, and she brings it across. She keeps her word. She actually, she's very supportive and all that. But it's like she's amazing. She's got to be my manager. So make her the manager. Except here's what happens when people go into management is they think the same skills that they learn to be an individual performer have anything to do with management. Okay. I mean, her thinking led to action, which led to results. Well, in management, people think, well, they know less than me. I know more than them. And so if they don't know, no problem. I'll just tell them. Then they'll know. And then they can do what I did. And it doesn't quite work that way. In fact, the number one job I would assert, okay, I mean, if you want to support people, to generate superior results or whatever you want to call it, the number one skill that any manager needs is the absolute opposite of what it takes to actually generate a result. And that's to provoke thought or thinking in others. And I can't provoke thinking if I'm telling them what to do because they go, oh, okay, I'll do that. And then their thinking stops and they just go do it, except they attribute it to the person who told them. They don't actually own it because, well, that was what their idea. They said I should do it. So I really don't own it, So, or they might rebel against it. And why are you telling me what to do? I mean, there's a whole bunch of different, it gets worse from just doing it. But the bottom line is the only thing they're not doing is thinking, because I've actually taken it off the mat. Whereas if I have, as a manager, you have to actually become a specialist at asking the questions that would provoke their thinking without saying, I'm just avoiding everything that you're asking me to do. Like, well, how do I figure out this? Well, I could tell you, but the problem with that is that your thinking doesn't move forward. Let's get into a dialogue. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. What have you done so far? What's worked about that? If there was one thing that you could do that you think would make the biggest difference, what do you think that might be? And if I see they're about to get themselves in trouble, okay, or if I'm under a really tight deadline, I go, well, that's one possibility. If it was me, then I might do this. So at least I'm in dialogue. I'm not just telling them what to do right off the bat. If I don't have a deadline that's immediate, then I might, or if the learning is too great from the direction they want to go and they don't understand it. It was interesting. I was talking to a client this morning and he was telling me, he says, people really do need to experience things. He said, for example, he says, when I was in high school, I thought I was, I played football and, and I was part of the defensive corps and all that. But he said, I wanted to try being a quarterback. And so he said to the coach, he said, we had a really good team. Our team was way better than the other guys. And he says, I could do this quarterback thing. So I thought, in the third quarter, when we're way up and I'm not going to do damage to the team. Okay. He talked the coach basically into letting him have a few plays at quarterback. So he goes in at quarterback and he said, Michael, they have something as a quarterback that they have no other place in football. I said, well, what's that? And he said, they hit you from behind. Why do you think the left tackle gets paid so much more than the right tackle? Most people are right-handed. They're turned this way. Whomp. He says,
Yeah.
I had one play. I handed it off. I was a train wreck for somebody. He said, I played that one. I got out of there. I said, Adam, you got it back again. I'm not doing this thing. He had no idea what it took to do that sort of thing. So, sometimes we do get clobbered, but the key is if you can keep the experiments really small and give people the experience, he would never have believed it had somebody told him that.
Mm-hmm.
Because he says, I'm used to hitting in football. That's not a problem. He says, I'm on defense. I hit guys all the time. And he says, guys will hit me too. But you always see what's coming except for the quarterback. So until you've actually experienced something, sometimes you need to let people go through that path. The key on those is to make the experiment small enough. And so if they say, well, I should do this action, you'd say, okay, are you sure that that's what's going to give you? I'm pretty sure. I think so. I'll tell you what would be the first step that you might do with that just to determine whether that's the direction you really want to go? And they go, well, I could do that. Okay, I'll tell you what, why don't you do that? And then come on back, it'll take you the next day or so. Let's take a look and see how you did. And all of a sudden they're like, Now I know why people don't do that. But then life teaches them, they'll remember it way more. And the fact that they're in dialogue, they also feel like somebody cares about them and they're interested in their growth. What I find is when people take the time to ask questions rather than do that, everybody thinks, well, that's far less efficient. It's going to take more time. What we're finding is people that were 2 years to become into more of a senior role are doing it in 6 to 9 months, just because it's not about the individual item, it's about the trust that's built with a quiet evolution of somebody's growth and development. And so we find that as we're working, for example, with new managers or people growing into managers or even seasoned ones, it's amazing what you see just by actually provoking thinking rather than telling. And everybody knows that in management you should tell them, and they'll know when they should do it. And it's like, yeah, not so much.
Yeah, let's stay there for a second because that was the question I was going to propose to you because I've worked consulting with a large international tool company, and one of the projects they brought me in on was their first line supervisors have terrible communications. Right. So one of the things I asked them is, well, how did they get promoted? Like, why are they a supervisor? Right. Because I want to look at what is the process that moved them up. And it was exactly as you said, Michael. They are the supervisor because they were the best at doing. So they were the best bucket builder, the best welder, the best painter. So of course, we should just make them in charge of all the buckets builders and the painters. But they don't have the communications, right? They're good at doing. They have not taught anybody how to do. So my question to you is, and I think I know the answer because I think we're on the same wavelength here. Businesses will push back and say that's too much time. We need to be more efficient. We don't have time for you to sit down there and coach them through the process. Tell them how to get it done to get it moving. But I would counter that you'll save time in the long run because you'll actually have critical thinkers that problem solve all the way down the line if you teach them up front versus creating employees who are dependent on you for every answer.
Well, that's absolutely true. And people who tend to micromanage, really all micromanaging is, you see, it has to be done this way. Well, those are people that think that there's only one model of the world. I mean, there's many ways to get stuff done. And it's more important that the person owns whatever their actions are than it is that they get the actions right. Because if they own them, they'll figure it out. You see, the thing that people don't realize is you say because they do and they get the results when they do stuff. In other words, they take action and they get it. Well, thinking always precedes action. If I go back to first principles, I will move somebody faster at first principles than if I had to go through the entire litany of different situations where that action may or may not apply. If they can think this through, they get there very quickly. And so initially, it does take a little bit longer, but not a lot longer. I got to tell you, it's like, here's the thing that I found. We actually had it was a group of journeyman tradespeople in a particular industry, and these guys were like between 10 and 15 years in their industry. Like these were senior guys, and they had juniors coming in, and they were, the company was growing, so they were bringing in more juniors, and so here's how it went. I tell you what to do. You do you do what's there. And it literally would take 2 years for them to grow into a senior minimum, 2 to 3 years, depending on how strong or not somebody was. And, they were usually good with their hands, but there was this notion that people that are in the trades aren't necessarily good thinkers. That's not my experience at all. My experience is you get some of the smartest, brightest, quickest people that are in that industry. They just are also good with their hands. Guys like me are just like, no good with their hands. I have to stay in my industry on. I know how to work a cell phone. Okay, we're good. But here's the thing. One of the things I did was I said, okay, I'll tell you what. And we had a group of 8 guys, and we picked on one guy. Okay, and I'll call him Joe. It's not his name, but so he just said, okay, so Joe, I'll tell you what. Are you willing to do an experiment? He said, sure. Let's try something. I said, okay, good. So here's what I want you to do. How often do you tell people what goes wrong? And he said, well, every time it goes wrong, I have to tell them because they have to fix it. I said, no problems. But so you're pretty much on top of when something goes wrong. He said, yep. I said, okay. How often do you tell people what goes right? He says, well, that's their job. They're supposed to know what goes right. I mean, what do you sit there? You am I going to blow sunshine up at their butt? Forget that. This is like a waste of everybody's time. I mean, what am I there? The fairy godmother or something? I said, no. Here's what I want you to do. I'll tell you what, just experiment. Okay. Now, these guys don't write anything down, but they will put stuff in their phone. I
Yeah.
said, so here's what I want you to do is each day, I just want you to notice one thing or two things right that this person is doing. Okay. And the guy, we're going to call him Peter, is the junior. Okay. And so Joe would actually watch Peter and he'd just put something in the phone. So we came back 2 weeks later. I said, how's that going? He says, I'm picking up a lot of different things. I'm noticing certain things. The guy's actually picking up a lot of stuff. I'm really happy with his progress. I didn't realize he was doing so well. I said, okay. And so, let's keep going. Another 2 weeks, he did it again. And then at the end of that 2 weeks, so we're now a month in. So, this is the third time I'm meeting these guys. And I said, so, what did Peter say when you told him about it? He said, you didn't say anything about telling him what I'm noticing. That's right. You know what? That's on me. That's not on him. I just asked him to make notes. I said, so I tell
Yeah.
you what, once a week, here's what I want you to do. Is I want you, you guys are driving to and from sites, which is fine because they have heavy equipment and a bunch of stuff. I said, here's what I want you to do is let him drive one. He's allowed to drive. He said, yeah, we're all licensed for the big equipment that we use. And I said, okay. I said, let him drive once a week. And then you just share back what you're noticing. This week, these are some of the things that I noticed. Okay, so he did that for a couple of weeks, and he said, "Okay." So I said, "So how did it go?" And he's talking. The other guys are in the room, right? His colleagues are in the
Yeah.
room. He said, "Well, I'm not sure." I said, "Okay, so what do you mean?" I said, What Joe said is he said he kept waiting for the other shoe to fall, and I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, you're telling me this good stuff. What did I do wrong? Like, why do I get the feeling I'm being set up here?" Because
Yeah.
nobody ever tells the good stuff. And so
Right.
after
Right.
2 weeks, I said, okay, well, I'll tell you what. Just let them know. Just say, listen, every time something negative happens, we deal with it on the spot, don't we? And he says, well, yeah. And it's like, well, do I have to regurgitate that and go over it again and again and again, or did you get it when I told you? He said, well, I got it when you told me. I said, so is that okay that I can let it go? And he's like, sure. But how often do I tell you the things that I notice that I'm really impressed with? He says, well, you don't. Well, do you think that might help you grow? Okay. And so 2 more weeks, and he'd once a week, he told them. And it was interesting because the second week, so this was now week 3 and week 4 of sharing with him what he noticed. And he said, I said, so how's it going? And Joe says, well, I think it's going okay. And I said, so what has you think that? And he said, well, he likes it. I can tell he likes it. He's finally relaxed around it, and he trusts that I'm just telling him the good stuff because we've already covered the bad stuff, and because they come up as they come up. He said, but there was one thing that was really curious. I said, what's that? He said, he's asking me for my opinion on many things now.
Mm.
It's almost like he trusts me more to tell him the things that make a difference. Okay. Peter was 7.5 months. He started doing this with Peter at what, about 4 months. At 7.5 months, they made Peter a senior leader.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like they'd never had anybody grow that fast because Peter started trusting Joe, and he'd ask him about different things, and he was trying things, and he'd say, so what do you think of that? And these guys are up on scaffolding. There's a bunch of different things they do. But he learned so much so quickly, but he got so inspired, and it was just quiet. Like, this guy is not like Mr. Cheerleader or anything like this. you know you don't get rougher than some of these guys, and he's like
Right.
rough, right? But it's like, oh my gosh, you should see the difference.
Yep.
And Peter's now part of a whole breed that's evolving, and they're doing so well that these guys have to double the guard because there are some areas that hadn't come up. Now they're making sure they have to catch those because they're making assumptions about how good these guys are when they really haven't had a ton of experience. So they're now watching, okay, now what's the second level? What's the area that I've missed, letting them know, and things like that. So their training continues to go.
Hmm.
But what's happening is that the team and the company as a result is getting so much stronger. And last year they had a 40% increase over the previous year. So they literally, and they were several million in the previous year, and they're 40% more last year than they were the previous year. And they figure they'll probably double this year just based on watching the levels of growth that the guys can achieve. All of a sudden, they can go a lot further. So
Yep.
it's fascinating to watch. And that's all based on putting in his phone. things that he notices that are working. And then and he's really mastered the art of asking the guy questions rather than actually telling him what to do anymore. And so that it's been fascinating to watch.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny when you said that because one of the strategies I had the managers do the same thing. I actually had them put it in their calendar every Friday, or actually, I think we did every Thursday at 2. They got a reminder that they needed to go down to their team and close the day with something good they've done all week. Right? Because we are so programmed to look for the negative, to look for the bad. That you're absolutely right. We forget to nourish the other half of the human spectrum, which is what am I doing well? And if you don't feed that, then you just play into my negative self-talk, my doubts, because then I'm looking at myself critically, like, why don't I ever hear anything good? Or, like you said earlier, I just shut you out because all I ever hear is the bad stuff. So now I don't really want to be around you.
Right.
So
But you're the boss, so I have to be around you. Now, here I have a question for you. So, Jared, do you know where that comes from?
the critical parent kind of focus, the negative draw.
Sure. The critical part, the negative part. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you primarily in the industries I work with is because that's what we're trained to do, right? It's the easiest thing to do. It's the most tangible. I can come in and say, I stopped these errors from happening because I saw it. I don't, it's hard to quantify giving people good conversations that get them to believe in themselves if I don't see a result in the next hour or they're not more productive at the end of the day. And quite honestly, it's easier for human nature. Right? It's part of our survival instinct. We look for the bad stuff that would have killed us back in our old days. And now we're safe and comfortable. So we don't have a lot of bad stuff to kill us. Now we look for all the things that we don't think are right.
Well, and so let's take off on that last point you made. I would say that this is not only is it part of human nature, this is a biological feature of wiring. We have the biological need to survive. And anything that looks like a threat, we got to, you know what? It doesn't matter how much we have the need to survive and we have the innate desire to thrive. But I promise you, survival always trumps thriving. That's why when people say, you need to hear 3 to 1 for somebody to seem that it's equal, and they said for every criticism, you need to come up with 5 good things just so that it starts to overbalance it a little bit. Because, if somebody goes 1 to 1, one positive, one negative, you know what we call that person?
But
Incredibly negative. They're so negative. You know what? When people are really positive, they're like 10 to 1, and they're like, they're critical a
yeah.
little bit, and when they say people are so positive, they're like 29 to 1. I mean, they've done studies on this stuff. And the truth is that 3 to 1 is equal for us. So one to
Okay.
one is absolutely negative because we need to survive. You know what? There's no alternative. And we think that we're logical. Okay? We are not logical. We are emotional. And that's not a problem. It's part of the survival mechanism. Now think about it. The question I look at is, well, why are we emotional? Why are we not logical? Because logic is too slow. So there's a bus coming at me. Well, what are the pros and cons of getting out of the way? No more Michael. Where if I go eek and I run and I get out of the street, you know what? I'm alive and
Yeah.
we even got adrenaline, noradrenaline pumping through the system, but that's all linked to the amygdala and the elements that have emotion around them. So that is a feature of survival. Now, not every day are we in survival mode, but not do we have life and death incidents? But that does keep us alive. And we don't need all our survival mechanisms done before we can actually thrive at all, because surviving is about ourselves, thriving is about others. If we had to get everything in survival done first before we could do anything that was thrive, why would a 5-year-old ever share a toy? They're not
Yeah.
in survival. So the truth is that that's when, of course, we want to be with others. It's only when we have that need, and it's either me or it's we, like my family, or the people in my company against the competitor, or whatever it happens to be. Whoever we deem we, that's where our focus is in survival. So it's biological. It comes to us naturally. Of course, it's there, and there's nothing wrong with people that do that. It's part of biology, and there's more to life than that. If for anybody who can actually move past that, and that's why when people talk about workspaces, they go, well, we need psychological safety. Well, that sounds all nice and fine. The bottom line is you need to have somebody relax in their chair,
Yeah.
because then they can actually focus on bringing their best, and they want to. But I need to know that you've got my back and I have your back. And if we have each other's back, we can relax and we can actually create something cool together. If
Yeah.
we don't have each other's backs, I have to protect myself from you. that'll take up an inordinately high amount of my energy.
Hmm.
So when I see somebody negative, you don't hold it against them. But there's way more to life than that. And so the key is if I can set it up so that, I mean, psychological safety sounds like such a conceptual term, but scared to death that
Yeah,
we feel.
for
Okay.
sure.
So, if I know that if I've got anxiety or fear or concern about something, if I can relax and find a way to sort that out, then I'm in a situation where I can actually participate in a very productive way. So I love what you're saying with regards to, the different reasons why people are negative. But I got to tell you, it's like you said, it's part of our survival.
It
You
is.
know,
So
the,
let's
go ahead.
talk on that. Let's talk on that, Michael. I'm interested on your thoughts on this because in researching this, I've seen different places where you said growth requires becoming a different version of yourself, right? Allowing yourself to become somebody different. So what does that look like for our community? What does that look like to explore that?
Well, it's interesting because one of the elements that I would say is you need to learn how to trust yourself. Okay. Um, there's no such thing as trusting somebody else. Trusting somebody else is either out of victim, I trusted them, or manipulation. I trust you. In other words,
Right.
don't screw up.
Yeah,
Okay. Whereas, you know what? If you invite a snake into your tent and it bites you, it's not on the snake. That's part of their nature. Okay. Now, I may need to learn a little bit. Oh, snakes, they bite. This is not good. I mean, that's it. It's the more I learn in life, the better I am at handling those things, right? But the other side of it is if I trust myself, my discernment, I'm in good shape. So it's not that I trust you, I trust my discernment about you. I notice these behaviors are there, you know. Everybody's got strengths and weak spots. So, well, let me just check with you, Jared. Do you have strengths and weak spots?
for sure.
Okay, so what's one of your top strengths? Other than
Uh
making
yeah.
podcast guests feel comfortable, because I feel very
Oh,
comfortable.
well,
Thank you
I
very much.
appreciate that. My greatest strength's always been self-belief. I
Okay,
just
self-belief.
believe I can accomplish things. Yep.
Okay, now, and what's one of your weak spots?
Um, probably staying. Just my self-belief's also one of my weak spots because I'll believe so strongly in things that sometimes I miss indicators I should move, pivot, or be on a different path. So I would say like just a focused on the beliefs.
So one of your strongest strengths is your self-belief, and one of your weak spots is sometimes you miss things
Yep,
when you're hyper focused. Okay, so just because you miss things when you're hyper focused, does that mean that one of your strongest strengths is not your self-belief? Like both
not
can be true, can't they?
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah. So to say I trust you would be like blindly taking all of it, pretending the negative stuff isn't there, okay? And thinking that everything is like, flowers and roses or whatever, Whereas I could say, I trust my discernment about you. Here's what I know is you've got really, really strong self-belief. You have this can-do attitude and you will get through something. And what I also find is that, you know what, there'll be the odd time where you miss some things because you're so focused on what it is that you're after. Well, that's my discernment about you, and I can be fully present to everything that's there with you and not like judge you for having a weak spot because we all have them, and not blindly accepting your strengths because again, we all have those, but you see what I mean? Like there's many dimensions to who we are. If I trust myself, then I'm fine. Now, if I take that another step, when do we stop trusting ourselves?
mm. When do we stop trusting ourselves? What would I say? When do I stop? Probably when I'm not getting the results I want, or things don't go my way, so now I doubt that I was capable to begin with.
Yeah, and I would say that there's an underlying thing going on when that happens. You start getting tired.
Fatigue.
Yeah, fatigue, stress, pressures, things like that. You know what? I used to find that, it might take me 3 days to decide something. I was back, I'm like, I don't know. What about this? What about that? I go away on vacation. I come back. I'm like, no, this is how we're doing it. Boom, boom, boom. In 15 minutes, the same issue that I used to mull over for 3 days, all of a sudden I'm crystal clear because I have my senses about me. When I'm
Uh,
I bet you there's a reason you work out, because your brain works better and your
For sure.
body works better and your clarity is there. And when you have your self-belief, it's based on you when you're fully centered. Was you're stressed out or preoccupied by a concern or worried or anxious, it's really hard to bring your best decision making to the table, isn't it?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So I noticed that if I'm looking at trusting myself and I learn how to trust myself, one of the critical things that leads to that is self-care.
Yep.
Electrolytes in your water. So that you're not just it's
Yeah.
not just running through you. Because when I do 3 liters of water a day, which of course, I live in Canada, so we do liters. But I'd spend a lot of time in the States as well, and so there we do the gallons when I'm down there. And so,
Yep.
a gallon of water is about 3 liters. That's a lot of water. Okay. But if I put electrolytes in, some actually gets into the cells. So that's
Right.
good. We like to be hydrated, making sure that you get enough sleep, making sure that you do work out, making sure that you
Yeah.
find ways to make your nutrition is strong, things like little things like that, um, just quietly make a big difference in terms of the clarity of thinking or the clarity of focus that I can bring to a situation.
Mm.
And it's amazing because I always look at what's the underlying or what's the background thing that drives these things. And so, if I know survival is driving behavior at work, or I know that that fear, because I'm in an anxious situation because it's really uncertain, we don't know what's going on, is impacting it. Then the question is, what do I need to do to take care of myself so I can make better decisions and actually generate the types of results that I'm looking for? Now, if I'm working with other people, how do I support them? And you can 90% of the time, anybody that's a parent with children knows, I guess it's hard to be a parent without children, but anybody who's any parent knows that if you've got a child that's acting up, it's either food or sleep. They're either tired, they're overtired, something like that, or I haven't given them the right nutrition. They're either hungry or they've eaten the wrong stuff. They had too much sugar and they're coming on a crash, or I mean, it could be anything. 90% of the time, it's one of those two things. Every now and then somebody gets hurt, or they have an owie
Right.
or something, but it's amazing to see basics and the impact of basics on all of us.
Yeah. Michael, what would you say are some of the blind spots that people carry that keep them from being able to move forward?
Well, one of the blind spots is what I'm going to call traditional model of business. You see, business the way it's perceived to operate these days has come from um, the Industrial Revolution, and it wasn't always like that. Before that, if you look at even back to management and people, you know, there was management of hierarchy and all that. But setting that aside, functional management was always a function of learn from the master. Apprenticeships were huge. Whether you were a doctor, and apprenticeships are still big in medicine, but a blacksmith, an engineer, an architect, any profession, a legal profession, it was learned from the master. If you were the master and I was your underling, I would do all the Joe jobs. That's part of our equation, and you would teach me what I need to learn to grow in that particular profession. Then in the industrial age, when you've got factories and assembly lines, well, if I have 20 veterans, each of which have two apprentices, they're all teaching these apprentices in their own likeness. It makes for a lumpy assembly line. It just doesn't quite work. So what they did was they said, instead of teaching one, apprentice six things, I'll have six different people and I teach them one thing and they just do their piece. And the managers hold the cards and see the overall picture. The person only sees their piece. Now the employees hated it. Okay. They'd actually like sabotage the equipment, stuff like that. Well, the bosses said, I don't care. You pay for it. And that's where unions actually came up in the early 1900s, 1903, 1904. You know what? The capitalists didn't care. It was so lucrative that they literally said, pay them. We don't care. Bethlehem Steel was processing and cutting 9 linear feet of steel per minute. And then they started bringing in management practices where there was more uniformity. Within 3 to 4 months, it went from 9 linear feet per minute to 50 linear feet per minute with fewer people. They said, why do we douse the whole lathe? Why don't we douse half of it and keep the other half going? Why do we have all the raw materials way over there? Why don't we put it by the front of the machine? I mean, basic stuff, and everybody was following the same systems, and all of a sudden productivity just shot forward. Well, we learned that that was actually the way to do business. And now we're in an information age. We're not in a product age where consistency of inputs and consistency of outcomes, you can break that down. In an information age, you're in a situation where you've got a lot of different things that are playing on, and there's many ways to get it right. There's many ways to get it wrong in services, whereas there was one way to do it, for the most part in different products. It would be different for each product. So when there's so many different things, it changed from the boss being the manager to people actually, we need their brains at the table. I don't care how long, how much of a veteran you are or how new you are. So thinking that people need to be told what to do, thinking that people need to be directed on things as opposed to actually tapping the brain power of each person. I mean, that's been happening for the last 40 or 50 years. It's only with the pandemic that it's sort of accelerated the motion that people are starting to notice. It's like, no, actually, our job is to facilitate the power of the brain power of the people that are there, because in an information age in a networked world, you need the brain power of people at the table. And so that thinking has shifted dramatically, and it's very slowly come in. Now, some of the best companies do operate and tap the power of their people as opposed to treat them like cogs in a system. They're more and more companies are becoming intelligent ecosystems rather than a well-oiled machine. But I mean, even to this day, you'll hear people go, people come, people go. You want to grow your company, you need to focus on the systems. And what they mean by that is focus on systems to try to constrain people and get them to do what I want them to do. Except to do that, you'd have to control people, and nobody wants to be controlled.
Mm.
People
What do
do
you
want to contribute. Go ahead.
Yeah, everybody wants to contribute, Michael, for sure. So let's stay on this topic for a second. How does AI factor into that? How do you
Well, AI
factor
is an
AI into
interesting
this?
thing. Well, you know, as people have been learning, one of the features of learning if you're a junior is that you'd have to do the Joe jobs
Yeah.
and you'd learn from those. On the one hand, AI is accelerating the effectiveness short term, as it gets better. I mean, there's still hallucinations going on in AI, but as it's becoming better, AI is taking over more junior roles. Um, and as a result, what's happening is that junior people are blocked from those junior roles because I can get a machine to do it at a fraction of the cost. And so there's this chasm that needs to be jumped to get people into something that's a little bit more mature, because otherwise I'm going to run out of people that get to the top end. So that's one of the challenges that they're facing. AI has been magnificent in many ways. I mean, Alphabet was using, they weren't replacing developers. They're not replacing developers with AI, but what they do is they get developers to work with AI as a sort of a check and balance against different things that they're doing. And they've actually accelerated the progress of developers with the use of AI. So, I mean, that's just one example. There's many. In medicine, there's a ton of examples where AI is being used at some of the lower level tasks. And there's also some things we're working out in terms of saying, well, how do we grow the juniors then
Hmm.
if we're getting the junior jobs being done by, this, I don't even know what you call it, this platform, or, the
Right.
thinking associated, or what we call the thinking associated with that. So we're still working through bumps and hiccups in AI, and it's revolutionizing how everything goes. I mean, right now, the economic situation in North America, US and Canada, um, has been struggling. It's actually dropped, except the stock market hasn't. Well, why has the stock market not? Because of AI. Data centers are being open left, right, and center. There's such a surge of what's available from an AI perspective. The stock market actually looks like the economy's in a highly robust state, except a lot of construction's on hold at the moment because people are uncertain about how things are going to evolve. So it's interesting. It's created sort of a mixed time for people, and we're still discovering what's available with AI and where are the edges. And the problem is, of course, if you want to call it a problem, the edges keep, what's available keeps expanding and the edges keep moving. So it's been hard to contain. A lot of people are still trying to get their head around, what's going on with it. Everybody needs to learn it. This is not some
Yeah.
fad, but at the same time, people aren't quite sure what and where and how. and yet the companies that are steeped in it are actually doing quite well. So
Yeah,
it's
and
it's a really, really interesting time.
it's not slowing down. But my concern is, like you mentioned, Michael, was that gap we're creating where people don't get to do, you call them the Joe jobs for the community that doesn't quite understand that, the menial jobs, the entry level jobs, the jobs you got to do and the task you got to do to prepare yourself to move up. Because they don't have the experience doing them, what happens to these people? Like, who's going to be prepared to be the senior leaders if they never got the chance to be the junior leader? And what do
Well,
we
here's
do with the people that are displaced because if those jobs are being done by robots or AI? What are they doing to better themselves at that point?
well, I my personal belief is, as a humanity, we've always run into challenges, and the fact is, we figured them out,
Yeah.
and we're going to figure this one out too. Do we know yet how? No. Are we enamored with what it can do? Yeah. And there's going to be a way. We're going to figure it out. Humanity's pretty smart. People are pretty, they're pretty good, and so there are people that are addressing those types of challenges and sort of working with those challenges and saying, what do we do about that and how do we build it? And the question, and it's not how do we just, well, we ignore this future thinking because we have to go back to do something. No, what'll happen will be some sort of synergistic solution will come up where we've got the best of both. And, uh, people are pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't,
Well,
you know,
especially when there's
faced a
some
challenge,
pain.
they do well. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Especially
Like
since
I promise when.
we hit a
Yep,
pain point, we'll come up with a solution.
absolutely. I mean,
Right?
whoever would have thought you could send a working population home and still have a country survive and thrive?
Yeah. Not
Nobody thought
me.
about that.
It wasn't in any of the business plans I'd ever studied.
Nope. And now that said, Peloton did quite well, thank you very much, when that happened. So there were some industries that actually thrived. Okay,
And
home renovations
the
soared.
the electrolyte business boomed as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
And,
So there's always those that
yeah.
happen. I mean, in whatever the economy is, whatever the circumstance is.
Yeah, and that's I love your perspective on that, and that's kind of what I like to share too. Is like I'm not going to be afraid of this, right? Because we're going to adapt. We're going to figure stuff out, just like we have with every other industrial revolution or big shift in how our lives are led. But one thing that never changes, and this is what I want to get your opinion on, is you specifically teach business owners to hire the right people. And I want to take that concept and kind of shift it also to, for our community members that aren't business owners, the importance of having the right people in your lives in general. Because no matter what AI does or doesn't do, or robots do or don't do, having the right circle around us will always be important. So, what do you say about, I guess, a couple of things like surrounding yourself with people that are elevating you, identifying the people that are elevating you and helping you get to where you want to be, and then also with the balance of recognizing like maybe this doesn't serve me no anymore. I'm trying to move in different directions.
Well, okay, so there's a couple of things about that. When you when people talk about putting themselves around like-minded people, and that said a lot of times people confuse that with people who have the same opinions as me.
Right.
And right now with social media and the algorithms, you will get more of the same of what you show an interest in, and it just keeps coming at you. Well, that's at the level of opinion or manifestation. It's not. See, where you want to align yourself, and this is true in hiring, and it's also true just in as you build your friendships and relationships. The question is, what are the core values that drive you? Okay, now everybody has the things that they think should be good or whatever, but different people have different values, and they're not necessarily better for some are better than others. It's just that mine will be better for me, yours will be better for you, and where we see that there's synergies between, that's where we'll participate together. And where our values don't necessarily align, we won't play in those domains. But if I know uh, that I can trust you no matter what with let's say my family, because you have such a love of children and you have such a love of really making sure that people are taken care of, you know what? I want you around my family if we're friends. If I know that you're not that great with kids, you're not that great with others, but you've got this brilliant mind and you love to explore different things, we'll participate in a completely different area of life and we'll explore different ideas and things like that. If I know that you're an avid camper and I'm an avid camper, now here's the thing, I'm not an avid camper, so don't get any misconceptions. Okay, my notion of camping is when there's wood on the brass taps in the five-star cabin, right? I mean, I'm a suck when it comes to stuff like that. But if we had some alignment on something, that's where we'd participate in life. And so the key is what's important to me. What are the types of things? What drives me? What are the things that I really care about? Like one of the comments you made that based on something I shared was, this whole notion of contribution. I want to be around people who contribute. Well, others maybe want around people that are absolutely masters at creating incredible wealth. Okay. Other people might be masters around what it takes to take care of the pet populations in the world. I mean, different people have different things that are really important to them at the level of the heart of them, not just an opinion about what's going on in the day. You know, anybody who's a sports fan has an opinion about which team is better than what other team. I
Right.
mean, well, okay, and what counts? That's what that. So when I look for like-minded people or people where I connect with, and this is true and it's really interesting in hiring because they don't always look the same as you. So if you're really brilliant at coming up with great ideas, and I'm completely the opposite personality, I'm the person that protects against what goes wrong. I may be ideal fit for you if we share the same values.
Mm.
If we don't share the same values, we're probably not going to fit. At the level of personality, we may not fit as well as we might otherwise, but the shared values are the connection that, because I'd look at you and I go, wow, with his values, which are aligned with mine, I love how he steps out in that. And you might say, with his values, which are aligned with mine, I love how he protects our bottom line and supports that out, sort of. But if we don't have the aligned values, stuff we do will get under each other's skin,
Mm.
you know, and
Yeah,
and
yeah, I
so
love that. That's
yeah.
good. Let me ask you this about that, right? Because I think sometimes, because you mentioned the social media and the algorithms, and you get bombarded with information that it thinks you're going to like, or that it knows you'll hate to get a reaction to keep you scrolling longer. And we're losing a skill, and that is to remain friends when we disagree on something and have polite discussions about, Michael, tell me why you think this, and be open and learning. But that is, if I want to really trust you, I don't trust people that only see everything the way I see it, right? I will trust somebody more that's like, hey, Jared, you said you were going to be doing this, and I noticed you haven't done this, right? Having this more critical conversation. Do you find that? Do you share that thought, or how do you feel? Because long-winded question. I'm trying to find my actual question. Is trust is built upon both sides of the relationship. I agree with you on things, and I can be safe to disagree with you.
Okay, so can I know
So
this, I,
that
I feel like I'm a little bit of a broken record here, but you know where I'm going to go is behind the scenes on stuff. Okay,
yeah.
so that's at the level of the surface. Here's the thing. There's I would assert, sir, that you do not control the relationship that you and I are generating. I mean, we've met each other for the first time today.
Yeah.
I do not control the relationship, but we both influence it. So there's this dynamic
Mm.
between us called the relationship. You influence it, I influence it. Neither one of us controls it. I can't control this unless I try to control you. And I bet you're not one that wants to be controlled, are you?
No, for sure.
No, neither am I. I don't know
Right.
anybody who is. They want to be controlled. I just don't know anybody, right? But but there's this thing that we both influence called the relationship. And so that's the thing that we interact with. Okay, so I don't look at do you believe my opinion or not? I look at what's important to you as we evolve this relationship, and what's the domain, what are the domains in which we do that? Is it because we each have relatives that are married or something, and then we end up being in the same social circles? Is it that we both volunteer for the same things? Is it that we're both involved in the same work activities because we happen to be in the same company? Whatever. And it's interesting because this dynamic actually causes more pain in businesses. If you take a look, anybody can participate in a group of 5, 8, 10 people, but when you start to get to 12 people, one group breaks into two. It's easier to deal with 5 or 6 people than it is to deal with a dozen. Okay. And so you can grow up to 8 or 10. And then the minute you get to 11 or 12, it starts to break. Go past 20 people, it gets a little bit hard to handle. If you take a look, though, and I actually did some stats on this, I've got them right here with me. So if you had 4 people, the number of one-on-one relationships with 4 people, say there's you, me, Clem, and Jerry.
Yeah.
Well, there's me with Slim, me with Jerry, me with you. There's you with Slim, you with Jerry, and then there's Slim and Jerry. There's 6 relationships, 6 one-on-one relationships. Now, if we go, that's a 2x2 little matrix. We go to 3x3 matrix. Okay, if that's 9 people. That goes to 36 relationships. If we have a 25-person company, okay, now we're at 300 one-on-one relationships. A 50-person company is 1,225 one-on-one relationships, and a 100-person company, I mean, and a 50-person company, 1,225 relationships. And you know what? In a 50-person company, you know each other. Like, you know them to say them. It's not like you don't know the names of half the people. There's only 50 of you. It's not that big.
Right.
25 one-on-one relationships, and by the time you get to 100 people, there's 4,950 one-on-one relationships that are potentially there. Almost 5,000 relationships with 100 people, and then you wonder why people try to constrain behavior. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
so this gets really hairy. So I have to try to reduce it. Well, how am I going to reduce it? Well, I'll try to increase my comfort. So I'll go to people that think like me. And the easiest way that social media has decided we think like each other is if we have the same opinions about the same stuff. That's not necessarily where the richness goes from the thing. I have to laugh. When you look at 100 people, having almost 5,000 relationships, now I mean, the term herding cats is real. And now we also know why the wedding is so hard to plan, the seating arrangement in your 100-person wedding. I can't put Jerry next to Mrs. McGillicuddy. He'll talk her ear off, and I'll hear about it for months. These are all the dynamics that happen in normal life, right?
Right.
So it's fascinating to see the dynamics. In fact, one of the reasons that I see people getting stuck as they hit different plateaus in business is
Mm.
because a combination of 2 things. One is they outstrip their structures. Okay. And the reason they outstrip their structures is because they got more people than the structures can hold. And second of all, I got all these people going on and I don't know how to deal with it. So you combine those two, the level of problems people hit at different stages of their business just continue to compound. And that's why people try to exert control. That's why everybody thinks of, well, if I had a well-oiled machine, I'll go with the systems and structures because I feel safe. It's an illusion because we're outstripping our structures anyway. It's like, if I look at this in terms of, a $1 million company. So if you have your company at $1 million, your same company at 5 million, and the same company at 10 million, the question I have is, what do they share? Well, the first thing is, well, they hopefully have the same product, although even that can morph. They've got the same value set if they're owned by the same owner or owners, and a few of the same key people.
Yeah.
Not many, because how many people do I have at $1 million? Whereas at 5 million or 10 million, I have a lot more. Everything else is different. The structures haven't lasted that long. There's no way you can run a $5 million company on the structures of a $1 million company. We all know that. And there's no way we can do a 10 million. So when people say focus on the structures, people come and go. It's like, okay, so you're throwing out the X factor of brilliant profits in your company. If I can tap the strengths of each person and really set it up so that they can want to bring their best, I have a whole different experience of business. By the way, that's why militaries, that's why fire departments, that's why orchestras, that's why plays, they all work because it's people lining up with their strengths and saying what structures will support those strengths. They drill soldiers forever, in times where they're not in the middle of a war. But I got to tell you, they have to keep each other alive. They say, well, I joined the army for my country. They may have, that's a concept. The reason they stay in the army and they work so hard and they do what they do and they save everybody's lives is because they're doing it for each other. You've
Yeah.
got my back, I've got yours. Right?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
so you're in a situation, that's where the power is. The power is always with the people. So if I can tap that X factor, the power, how do I build structures that support people as they grow? And I find that if you take a look, this thing called relationship that's between us is actually, in my opinion, the core of everything in life. So how's that for a
Yeah, and
pop
it's
off?
I love it, and it's the easiest to neglect. It's the easiest to say, "I don't have
We assume
time."
it all the time. Yep.
I don't
We
have time
totally
to
do.
check in with Michael and see how his weekend was. I don't have time to check in with Michael and make sure his wife, who is just in the hospital, or is doing okay, right? We miss that, and then we scramble down the road when things aren't going the way we want. And it turns out all that's been missing is just what you said, the actual people portion of our jobs.
Absolutely. And that's not some mom and apple pie utopian notion. It's probably the hardest, hard-headed, nose to the grindstone, the most effective way to maximize profits and maximize customer value and maximize shareholder value is to actually put the people first and have the structure support the people, because the people are amazing in the power that we each bring to a situation. Now, it is a design issue. You want to design it so that you've got complementary strengths to your people. You have common goals that everybody's working with. You have ways to communicate with each other. I keep my team sizes of a certain size so I don't have the cliques and the breakdowns of different structures. There's ways to do all that.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies are doing that. And not everybody is, because they're so busy trying to protect themselves against all the survival things that are coming up as they hit each stage of growth. You know?
Well, it's harder, right? In my opinion, it's harder. It's harder to actually lead and coach people to be their best because that takes my
Hmm.
energy. That takes my
Yep.
attention. It takes conversations. It takes me going, I got to have a difficult conversation today. It's much easier for me to put you on a task, hold you to that task, and only come tell you when you mess up or don't deliver the task and never pay attention to the good. That's way easier on me,
Except I would say there's an illusion that it's easier. You
for
will
sure.
pay. It's just that you pay it down the road. You
Exactly. That's
don't
what
pay it now,
I was gonna say.
right?
Short term, it's easier. Long term, it's a deficit. It never pays off. And the
It's
inverse is
easier to
true.
eat the cupcake now,
That's right. Yeah, I love it.
right? Or 3 or 4 muffins as opposed to, I got to do my squats. Okay, fine.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, as we wrap up, give me an idea of, for our community out there, what's one small improvement somebody can make this week that would create momentum? Um, Getting them forward, whether it's in their business, their personal lives, their fitness, whatever. How do you suggest somebody goes about creating a small habit that builds momentum?
Well, there's people that have already said things like make your bed. If you want to have a win each day and things like that. Here's what I would say. And this sounds really trivial, but again, if I look at little things that are too small to fail, that's there. I know that if I'm centered and in good space, I make better decisions.
Uh,
Find 3 people to be grateful for each day and let them know. Listen, I really appreciated that note you sent me the other day. I thank you so much for that. And it takes 30 seconds, and I feel better for sharing it. You probably feel better because I acknowledged it. Whether you do or not, I'm actually doing it as much for me as I am for you. And if I do the 3 of those things early in the day, then I'm in a situation. And if I can't do 3, I do at least 1. Too small to fail. And if I do that on a regular basis and I just get in that habit, what I notice is I need my survival skills a little bit less because I've got myself in a little bit more centered space and I'm in pretty good shape. So if there was a little thing that I could do, you know what? Acknowledge 3 people a day and see what happens.
I love it. Michael, thank you so much for joining our show. I loved our conversation. Where can our audience follow you? You got a new book coming out. Where can they join your community and be part of your journey?
Sure. Well, the latest book that I've got is called uh, I've got it right here. Freedom by Design. This is our little card on it. The the Established Business Owner's Guide to Grow, Make an Impact, and Find the Joy Again. So it's for established business owners, who want to take their business to the next level, and they're looking at, how do I increase my freedom? And I'm thinking of freedom in the business, freedom from the business, and freedom because of the business. And so, any country that has Amazon has got access to that book. We're at walshbusinessgrowth.com. That's our website. So you can always look up that, or just check me out on LinkedIn. You just type in Michael Walsh, and I'm in there somewhere. Um,
Awesome.
but anybody wants to get in dialogue with anything, we have a great time connecting with people and seeing how we can make a difference in different people's lives.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much for joining us, my friend. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.